Chapter 16, Journey of an Insurgent Sniper. Iraq, a history of guerrilla warfare. Guerrilla warfare is nothing new to the people of Iraq. From 1980 to 1988, Iraq fought a brutal campaign against Iran reminiscent of World War I, replete with trench warfare, human wave attacks, and poisonous gas. During this horrific bloodletting, both sides used resistance movements to advance their cause. Saddam Hussein gave sanctuary to the Mujahideen, Khalq, MEK, an Iranian dissident group which waged a low-grade insurgency against the Iranian regime since the 1970s. From their safe havens in Iraq, the MEK made cross-border raids, collected intelligence, and conducted assassinations and terror attacks against the Iranian government. Along with the MEK, Saddam promoted insurgencies with Iran's Kurdish and Arab populations, but with little success. Iran fought back with its own campaign of unconventional warfare. A central element of this group included supporting opposition groups like Iraq, the Supreme Council for Islamic Revolution in Iraq, SCIRI, which became a powerful Shiite political party. The SCIRI was more than just a political movement. It had real teeth in the form of the Badr Corps, the armed wing of the SCIRI. From founding of the SCIRI in the early 1980s until the fall of Saddam Hussein, the Iranian regime, through its SCIRI surrogate, waged a decades-long guerrilla war against the Iraq government. The Saddam Hussein regime faced even more problems with its northern Kurdish population, which tried for decades to secure their own independent state. From the 1960s until 2003, the Iraqi Kurds fought an ongoing guerrilla war against the Iraqi government with limited success. Saddam Hussein's counterinsurgency efforts against the Kurds involved the mass detention of Kurdish rebels, the bombardment of Kurdish villages with chemical weapons, and the smothering of rebellious Kurdish areas with loyal regime troops. After the U.S. invasion and defeat of Iraq in the 1991 Gulf War, Saddam Hussein waged his own guerrilla war against the United Nations and the United States as the victors of the Gulf War tried to enforce various sanctions and no-fly zones against him. Saddam undermined the economic sanctions leveled against Iraq by bribing UN officials and tunneling his own coffers the limited amounts of international aid that did come in. He flouted the no-fly zone laws and played cat and mouse with UN air patrols, targeting them with anti-aircraft missiles and painting them with Iraqi radar systems. To top it off, Saddam played a shell game with international arms inspectors, refusing to cooperate with them fully and creating the impression he had hidden stocks of nuclear, biological, and chemical weapons. To complicate the situation, in 2001, the Iraqi Kurds were themselves confronted with an insurgency when the Ansar al-Islam movement began to carve out a slice of territory in eastern Iraqi Kurdistan, along with the mountainous Iranian border. In this hard-won sanctuary, Ansar al-Islam constructed a religious society where a strict interpretation of the Quran was enforced. Anyone who did not agree with the Ansar al-Islam agenda was shot, beheaded, blown up, or run out of town. As Ansar al-Islam dug in and consolidated its power base, it spread its influence deeper into Kurdistan, assassinating Kurdish political and military leaders whenever possible with sniper attacks, car bombs, and martyr operations. Consequently, the Iraqi Kurds, who were fighting a guerrilla war against the Saddam regime, now face their own guerrilla movement. As a result, it is no exaggeration to say every strata of Iraqi society had some level of experience in either promoting or combating an insurgency, even if this experience was forced on them. The Iraqi insurgency, 2003 to 2008. When the U.S. military invaded Iraq on March 20th, 2003, they promised to bring with them shock and awe. In short, the Iraqi military would be so overwhelmed with America's superior military technology they would be paralyzed and simply collapse. This is exactly what happened. Only 19 days into the war, the Iraqi military imploded, Saddam Hussein was on the run, and the U.S. had virtual control of the country. Iraq's regime was unprepared for the kind of war the U.S. was trained to fight, and they quickly disintegrated under the onslaught of precision cruise missiles, Abrams main battle tanks, and lumbering B-52s disgorging satellite-guided bombs. While the Iraqi military was completely unprepared for the American tidal wave, The same could be said of American forces who found themselves confronted by a rapidly growing resistance movement, grounded among a people adept at living in a state of perpetual guerrilla war. In contrast, the U.S. military had virtually no modern experience in unconventional warfare, and it showed. The 5 million Sunnis who supported Saddam Hussein for decades and fought a vicious counterinsurgency war against their Kurdish and Shia brothers now experienced a stark role reversal. The Sunni people were no longer the enforcers of the status quo. They were now committed to toppling the new American-backed, Shia-dominated government. Overnight, the oppressors became the oppressed. The counter-guerrillas became the guerrillas. It soon became apparent the Sunni resistance was more prepared for this kind of warfare than most experts thought. Compounding the complexity of the situation was not all of the Iraqi Shia were on the same sheet of political music. Some, like Muqtada al-Sadr and his powerful Mahdi army, waged their own guerrilla war against the American occupation forces and against the newly elected government. The Kurds in the north resisted any central control of their increasingly independent chunk of the country, which slowly developed into a safe haven for Kurdish guerrillas fighting for independence from Turkey. The situation in Iraq became similar to the various anti-Israel factions in Gaza and the West Bank. So many different factions were fighting for so many different reasons, it was hard to keep track of them all. It was like trying to fight a headless monster whose many tentacles did whatever they wanted. There was no central brain to kill, no single head to decapitate. Amidst the swirling morass of contradictory political ambitions, a sophisticated new form of guerrilla warfare developed. This new war was largely an urban one, fought in major population centers like Erbil and Mosul in the north, Ramadi and Fallujah in the west, Najaf and Basra in the south, and of course Baghdad, which alone had a population of 6 million people. In Iraq, car bomb attacks were used on a scale never before seen. As many as 800 car bombs a year were detonated, collapsing buildings and slaughtering crowds of people in a single blast. Improved explosive devices, improvised IEDs, were also used on a massive scale. As many as 25,000 IED ambushes a year were set, causing the majority of American deaths in the country. Suicide bombers were used in vast numbers, where single individuals wearing explosive vests infiltrated crowded cafes and blew themselves up, shredding the surrounding people with ball bearings and nails. Amidst the cacophony of spectacular car bomb attacks and deadly IED ambushes, a little talk but threat seeped into the battlefield: the urban sniper. Sniping attacks did not grab headlines, they did not create carnage on a massive scale, and they did not grab the imagination like mass casualties did. Getting killed by a rather boring bullet did not even rate being covered by the Brookings Institution's Iraq Index, a comprehensive report which continuously tracked how U.S. soldiers were killed in the war. The Iraq Index did tell how many soldiers were killed by IEDs, car bombs, rocket-propelled grenades, mortar and rocket fire, helicopter accidents, shoot-downs, and non-hostile fatalities, but not snipers. By September 2007, the Iraq Index recorded 1,176 U.S. soldiers being killed by hostile fire, but we do not know how many of those were from guerrilla snipers. If one had to make a rough estimate, to date there have probably been 2,000 soldiers killed and wounded by snipers, with the understanding in Iraq there has been an 8-to-1 ratio of wounded to dead. The sniper problem in Iraq was bigger than most people thought. Just as the insurgents took car bombs, IED, and suicide attacks to new heights, they also fully embraced the art of urban sniping. In Iraq, sniping was a widespread phenomenon, not just isolated to a specific city or region. U.S. and Iraqi government forces all over the country came under the crosshairs in the nation's major cities, especially in the capital of Baghdad. The sniper problem grew bad enough by October of 2006, U.S. military commanders met in Baghdad for a conference on the subject. They were prompted to hold the meeting in part from the fact 36 U.S. soldiers were shot by snipers in Baghdad alone that month, up from 23 recorded sniper attacks in September. By the fall of 2007, only 4.5 years into the war, the insurgent snipers learned their profession at a rate faster than any other previous guerrilla movement. Many of these snipers fired from inside cars and vans, a method only used sporadically by the IRA a decade earlier. Some snipers used sound suppressors just like the best PLO shooters did in the occupied territories of Israel. Others fired from within the bowels of the cities. using the complex three-dimensional urban terrain to confuse and overwhelm their targets like the Chechens did. The Iraqi snipers also conducted home invasions, cut loopholes in the walls from abandoned buildings, toyed with the idea of remote sniping, and used deceit at all times, intentionally blending in with the population from start to finish. As we read in the earlier chapter on the psychology of sniping, the insurgents took the media war to new levels, filming sniper attacks and distributing them worldwide. To make sure other snipers learned from these lessons, the insurgents posted online sniping manuals and distributed them on compact discs to the public. No other guerrilla war witnessed such a sophisticated sniper campaign. Genesis of an urban guerrilla sniper. One of the guerrilla snipers fighting this sniper campaign was Abu Othman. Not his real name. Abu Othman was from Fallujah, a calligrapher by trade. Despite no formal training, Abu Othman shot his way from being an inexperienced craftsman to an accomplished sniper who was sought out by various insurgent groups to ply his deadly trade. According to his own tally, he had 29 kills to his credit. Abu Othman was also known simply as the Sniper in insurgent circles and reportedly killed his prey out to distances as far as 1,000 meters. How was it Abu Othman, the son of an Iraqi police officer and a deserter from Saddam Hussein's army, achieved such skill in such a dangerous environment and lived to tell about it? Abu Othman's first step in becoming a guerrilla sniper came with the American invasion of Iraq. After the collapse of Saddam Hussein's regime, Abu Othman returned to Fallujah with his wife and 4 children and found themselves living under the occupation of U.S. forces. One day, American forces fired on a crowd of angry demonstrators in Fallujah and killed 13 people. This killing of Iraqis by American soldiers was the end of Abu Othman the calligrapher and the beginning of Abu Othman the sniper. Abu Othman, enraged by this atrocity, felt a sense of nationalism and religious fervor grow in him. He decided to do something about the American occupation. With no one to teach him, Abu Othman set off on a self-designed sniper training program to become the best marksman and sniper he could be. He had some appreciation for shooting since he hunted birds for pleasure, and he thought he was disciplined enough to be a sniper because the art of calligraphy demanded attention to detail and patience. To start, Abu Othman read manuals on the subject of sniping, as well as material on mathematics and physics to learn the basics of ballistics and the capabilities of his weapon. All he needed to know about sniping was readily found on the internet, to include personal accounts of soldiers in combat and their assessment of various rifles. Besides reading these materials, Abu Othman showed some real ingenuity and studied films like JFK, The Deer Hunter, and Enemy at the Gates to understand the tactics and art of sniping. He even used PlayStation shooting games as a means to better understand his new profession and sharpen his senses. With these preparations under his belt, Abu Othman shot at homemade wooden targets on an improvised desert range with a borrowed rifle until he could hit targets at 1,000 meters. Now, his training complete and his skills up to task, Abu Othman contracted an insurgent group operating in Fallujah and offered them his services as a sniper. His commitment was soon tested when the insurgents asked him to kill an American officer negotiating a ceasefire with Fallujah officials. To accomplish this mission, Abu Othman climbed to the top of a mosque minaret with a borrowed sniper rifle. From this vantage point, Abu Othman shot and killed the American officer, who was standing amongst a group of U.S. soldiers. As a token of their appreciation for his successful attack, the insurgents gave Abu Othman a gift, his own Russian-made SVD sniper rifle. With this first experience under his belt, Abu Othman was called on again to shoot an American sniper who had a group of insurgents pinned down somewhere in the dirty, sprawling streets of Fallujah. He was led to a roof overlooking the American sniper's position. Abu Othman then made a single shot, hitting the American sniper in the head, killing him instantly. Abu Othman recovered the fallen sniper's weapon and added it to his inventory. Later that week, Abu Othman killed 2 additional American snipers, quickly building up his reputation among his fellow insurgents. The guerrilla sniper virus spreads. Because of his proven success, Abu Othman was asked to train other guerrilla snipers in Fallujah. He soon developed a training curriculum for his students entitled Increase God's Mercy by Sniping Americans, and produced an instructional CD-ROM displaying all the techniques he learned during his self-taught training regimen. Now, with his new group of 35 sniper students, Abu Othman could spread his skills to new recruits. Abu Othman and his crew were in big demand, and they traveled across increasingly war-torn Iraq, conducting sniper attacks on the infamous Sunni Triangle in Fallujah, Ramadi, and Baghdad. During one mission, Abu Othman managed to secure $6,000 from an angry Iraqi citizen who paid him this sum to kill an American soldier who damaged local property and showed disrespect to the Iraqi community by urinating in public. Abu Othman ended up shooting this American as he stood on top of a Bradley fighting vehicle. This much-needed money was invested back into the movement, used to buy new weapons and more ammunition for Abu Othman and his group of snipers. After this initial trials by fire, Abu Othman became a sniper for hire who plied his trade to whatever insurgent group needed someone killed. Once he got a mission, Abu Othman drove to his new assignment with a bag holding the tools of his trade: water, an inflatable mattress, a prayer mat, tapes of Quranic verses, maintenance tools for his rifle, and a few hand grenades. When American forces pounded Fallujah in November 2004, retaking the city after weeks of bloody, close-in fighting, Abu Othman was out of town with his family. Even though Abu Othman did not take part in the fighting, members of his sniper group did, resulting in the death of 9 of them. As of February 2005, Abu Othman was unable to conduct any more sniping attacks because his equipment was still trapped in Fallujah, and he ran the risk of getting captured trying to recover it. So Abu Othman waited to receive an Italian sniper rifle, which an insurgent cell was getting him. As soon as he got his rifle, he would begin killing Americans again. Analysis of Abu Othman as an urban guerrilla sniper. The account of Abu Othman, written by the well-known journalist Hala Jabber, allows us inside the head of an urban guerrilla sniper and is thus important for understanding his tactics, techniques, and procedures. We got to see how Abu Othman actually became a sniper, what his motivation was, how he trained, and how he grew in his profession. The reader also gets some insight into Abu Othman's successful methodology. While Abu Othman was apparently successful, he did make mistakes during the course of his operations, which may lead to his eventual death or capture. The most interesting aspect of Abu Othman was his ability to train himself into an accomplished sniper. This shows a guerrilla with the right motivation can transform themselves into a credible threat using unconventional means. No one taught Abu Othman how to shoot. He made himself learn how to shoot. Abu Othman did not attend any expensive shooting schools. He did not pay an experienced sniper to instruct him in the art, and he never received any military or law enforcement training to prepare him for the role of urban guerrilla sniper. Who would have thought playing video games and watching war movies would produce someone skilled enough to kill a platoon's worth of men? Abu Othman shows the urban guerrilla can train themselves despite the presence of security forces who seek to stop such training. This is because all the tools for learning urban guerrilla sniping are out there: the internet, movies, books, and manuals, and self-made ranges. One just has to apply themselves to learn the trade. After Abu Othman became experienced and skilled in his craft, the insurgent organization he worked with was smart enough to make him an instructor for future guerrilla snipers. This type of knowledge transfer is exactly what the successful guerrilla organization must facilitate and what security forces must prevent at all costs. If someone like Abu Othman does develop into an experienced guerrilla sniper, there's nothing to stop him from producing his own manuals and instructional CDs. Anyone can type up a sniper manual on a home computer and burn as many copies of it as they want onto CDs, and security forces cannot stop them. Now, in modern times, with the ability to make and distribute cheap and untraceable media, a single urban guerrilla sniper can become a source of learning spreading like a virus. The Virgin Shooter. Abu Othman was difficult for security forces to defeat because they did not know who he was. He was not an Olympic shooter or a former military marksman. There were no official records anywhere indicating Abu Othman possessed the skills he had. From a security perspective, this is the exact kind of sniper the guerrilla organization looks for: a faceless, nameless nobody whose security forces are completely oblivious to. It was equally advantageous to the Iraqi guerrilla organizations to recruit other novice shooters with clean records so Abu Othman could train them with the same anonymous manner. The more anonymous shooters there were out there, the more difficult it was for security forces to track them down through good police work. Remaining anonymous would become more and more difficult for Abu Othman the more successful he became. Abu Othman's skills already brought him notoriety among his fellow insurgents, and you're reading about him now. Abu Othman no longer flew under the radar like some other less glamorous insurgent who did nothing so risky. Like collecting information on the government, being a successful sniper is a high-profile job and brings a lot of admiration from fellow insurgents, while also bringing potentially life-ending interest from enemy security forces. The fact that Abu Othman was popular enough to warrant an interview by someone as well known as Halal Jabber shows how vulnerable he became to discovery by government informants. This process is an inescapable spiral. The more people Abu Othman killed, the more well-known he became, and thus the more vulnerable he became to exposure. The minaret shot. We learn a lot by studying Abu Othman's first mission when he shoots the American officer negotiating with the Fallujah officials. During this operation, Abu Othman was just one piece of a larger effort to conduct the attack. The insurgents already had the officer under surveillance and were planning his demise. Obviously, the insurgents had dedicated clandestine surveillance operators to determine the target's schedule and already picked out a place to shoot from, the minaret. All they needed was a skilled shooter. Even though the minaret dominated the urban landscape, it was also the most obvious one. As soon as Abu Othman made the shot, he and the surveillance operative who identified the American officer to Abu Othman had to run down the stairs to the minaret to escape. As they made their mad dash to safety, American forces opened fire on the minaret, instantly recognizing where the shot came from. If Abu Othman shot from obvious positions like that too many times, he was liable to wind up with a severely shortened career. Shooting from the mosque provoked American forces into a violent response that damaged the mosque and their counterattack. The damage to the mosque served to further incense the local populace, who did not care the Americans were defending themselves. From their perspective, shooting from the mosque was a good move because it placed American forces in a lose-lose situation. The roof shot. Abu Othman's second attack against the American sniper on the roof is also revealing. With the minaret shot, Abu Othman was just a shooter, one piece of a larger organization. It is important to note, Abu Othman did not collect his own intelligence and was not a lone wolf sniper. He was fed his targets from insurgent groups who had intelligence collection cells specializing in developing targets for insurgent shooters like Abu Othman. While stalking the American sniper, Abu Othman showed some sniper tradecraft, usually reserved for more experienced shooters. In order to distract the enemy sniper, Abu Othman employed an assistant who held up a dummy silhouette with a scarf wrapped around its head, all while the American sniper was pinning down another insurgent group with well-aimed fire. Abu Othman held all the cards by using deception and flanking the sniper for a better position, while his enemy was focused on another threat. Overall, this was a competent job of sniping for a novice engaged against the best army on earth. The Bradley shot. By the time Abu Othman targeted the soldier standing on the Bradley fighting vehicle, he was an experienced shooter. Again, Abu Othman has given his target by a surveillance cell who knew the target's pattern, where they were going to be, and when they would be going there. Just before the target approached Abu Othman's position, he got a call on his cell phone warning him of his approaching prey. This reveals they had unseen surveillance assets at the place of the attack who could watch the target and warn the shooter, all while remaining undetected by American forces. On the other hand, this sniper attack reveals some areas that could be exploited by security forces. If the guerrillas are dependent on cell phones to warn the shooter, these calls are susceptible to interception by security forces. In the future, a similar phone call might warn local security forces of an imminent attack. Also, as Abu Othman was waiting for this call from his rooftop position, he said he listened to Quranic verses to help him relax and clear his mind. This may be an indication Abu Othman is becoming confident in his work, maybe too confident. Overconfidence can lead to sloppiness, which will get the urban guerrilla killed. One should keep in mind using a rooftop position can be a life-ending decision as it exposes the sniper to the security force's aerial assets like airplanes, helicopters, unmanned drones, and satellites that can look specifically for a sniper on a roof. Abu Othman also mentioned he put padding on his elbows and knees to protect them while crawling on the hard surface of the roof. This is a smart move that made Abu Othman's movements into position less painful, so he could focus on making his shot and not worry about the pain of his joints. However, this is a good tidbit for security forces when looking for incriminating evidence against him. If security forces find elbow or knee pads when searching a suspected insurgent residence or safe house, they will probably look a little harder after making this discovery. Additionally, scraped knees and elbows may be an indication of someone conducting sniper attacks. In Vietnam, American forces looked at the shoulders of suspected Vietnamese guerrillas to see if they were carrying rucksacks. In Chechnya, Russian forces checked suspected Chechen guerrillas for bruised shoulders from firing rifles. Today, security forces can check Iraqis' elbows and knees. Have sniper rifle will travel. The fact Abu Othman worked in several different large cities had its advantages and disadvantages. This travel was an advantage from a security perspective in that Abu Othman divided his operations against different security units located tens of miles away from each other. This made it difficult for the separate units to develop a single, comprehensive profile of him. Security forces probably thought they had several different snipers on their hands instead of just one. The more time and distance Abu Othman placed between his separate attacks, the less of a signature he created, and the harder it was for local informers to get a read on him. The fact Abu Othman had a 3-month lull after narrowly escaping the meat grinder of Fallujah was advantageous to him because it lowered his profile. This absence also might have led security forces to think they killed Abu Othman, just like his 9 sniper students. If Abu Othman actually traveled with a bag with his rifle in it and all of his sniping tools, then he was sloppy from a counter-forensics perspective. What if he got pulled over at a checkpoint? What if his car was broken into? What if his car got stolen? What if he got in a car accident? Also, after studying Abu Othman's equipment, security forces can now look at inflatable mattresses as being associated with comfort for long-term sniper positions. An end to the killing. It is important to note Abu Othman was a religiously motivated and devout Muslim. Perhaps one way to get Abu Othman to lay down his arms was to contact his imam, religious leader. If his imam knew about his activities, the imam could be pressured to give up information about Abu Othman, such as where he lived and what his name was. Furthermore, Abu Othman stated he felt comfortable killing Iraqi soldiers because religious leaders issued fatwas, religious edicts carrying the force of religious law, saying these Iraqis were collaborators and thus justly targeted. If Abu Othman's religious motivations could be influenced through his imam, then so might his guerrilla activities. Perhaps a fatwa reversing the previous decisions would put an end to Abu Othman's killing. On the other hand, Abu Othman made it clear he would fight the American occupation forces until they left his country. While it might be possible to get Abu Othman to stop killing his fellow countrymen, he was unlikely to stop killing American soldiers. In this case, Abu Othman's killing might only end when U.S. forces withdraw from Iraq or when the bullet from an American sniper finds its own mark. Author's note: this article by Hala Jaber has been criticized by some as being fraudulent, a piece of insurgent propaganda. Part of their reasoning is they doubt a sniper could become self-taught, in part from video games and movies. Skeptics believe the article is really a tall tale, yet offering very real ways to train potential homegrown snipers so they can better hunt U.S. forces. In essence, they argue this story was put out by the insurgents as a training tool, which the leading media services distributed to a worldwide audience as a news article. If true, this was a clever, unconventional manner to inspire, educate, and train other potential guerrilla snipers. The reader should review this article for themselves and form their own opinions.